on our speaker and our presentation for this afternoon. We have people joining in on Zoom, of course, and on Facebook as well. Anybody who has any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the chat box, or even feel free to comment on Facebook. We'll be monitoring these and we will try to weave them into the conversation as and when we get along and they're relevant. And we have a short video, but stay tuned. We'll be starting in just a couple of minutes. Rudra, can you? Oh. We seem to have run into a little bit of a technical glitch, but stay with us. I believe Rudra's dropped off. Yeah, that's okay. He'll be back soon. Yeah, but we are still live and we are still working. We've got our host back on. So this is the problem with virtual stuff, right? Technology, how we depend on it and how we can't rely on it. But give us just a couple of minutes and we will be back. Rudra, you can play the video now. Great. It's really exciting to be here this afternoon. And once again, a very, very warm welcome to everyone who's tuned in on Zoom and on Facebook from across the world. We are here together for another episode of VC Live, which is an initiative by GVCC, which stands for Godrej Value Co-Creators Club. The club was established last year, which is a platform for nurturing architecture and the interior design community. And we've already signed up if you've already signed up to be a member, then of course you're more than welcome and you've been getting our regular updates. However, if you are new, then you have a lot of benefits available to you if you become a member, and we will be sharing a link to that in the chat box. So make sure that you click on that and join us. We currently have about 1,300 practitioners who are members and growing by the day. The GVCC, which is the Godrej Value Co-Creators Club, has initiated this series of conversations called the VC Live. It's a monthly series, and we hope to make them interactive and educational conversations with experts in the fields of architecture and design. In this season, we are addressing various aspects of what makes design conscious and how one can design consciously. And therefore, we talk about conscious living and smart living. So through a series of insightful, informal conversations with experts, as well as young talent, we hope to define an equitable and empathic process of creating environments that are responsive to the needs and aspirations of its inhabitants. So as curators, Sneha and I are very happy to be able to have these conversations with you and bring them to you. Let me introduce Sneha. Sneha, do you want to come on and say hi quickly?
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on a weekend.
Yeah. So Sneha and I are co-curating this series, and Sneha is a former journalist, an educator, and a curator of storytelling experiences. She has previously worked with Jaipur Rugs, 200 Million Artisans, Godrej Properties, as well as Elle Decor. And her current focus is in brand and marketing communications and curating experiences for end users. She enjoys working with design, luxury, retail, real estate, fintech, and social impact brands. Along with Sneha, I am an architect by training. I have practiced for many years in architecture, lighting design, I've taught at university, and I was also the founding editor of Mondo Arc India, the print journal, as well as stirworld.com. My curiosities currently lie in questioning normative mechanisms and in the creative community, which manifests through my written and curatorial practices. So we bring both our sort of ends of our expertise together and hope to have exciting conversations with people. So in this season, which is the second season of VC Live, we will be addressing the idea of smarter living. And of course, this is a very broad term, but which encapsulates various aspects of how we live today. However, for us, smarter living extends beyond tech integration and innovation, right? We want each session to focus on efficiency, on sustenance, on long-term use and effects. It's not just about the natural and built environment as a whole, but we're talking about our personal and more intimate environments as well. So we have experts who come and share about how they plan to bring back the focus on and be more attuned to evolving human needs through meaningful and effective design. Today's masterclass is titled Smart Process and Smart Practice. And for us, it was very exciting to bring this together because whether you're a student or a young practitioner or an established designer, the need for a smart practice is imperative. And you cannot set up a smart practice without a smart process. This could include the way you approach design, your business acumen, your attitude towards clients, material technology, as well as the tools that you choose to equip yourself with. And to address this, we couldn't find a more appropriate speaker for the day than our very own Manit Rastogi. A very, very warm welcome, Manit. I'm very happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Renali.
So a quick introduction to Manit, even though he doesn't need one, but still, Manit is the founding partner at Morphogenesis, one of India's renowned in architecture and urban design practices, which is also listed among the top 100 architectural firms globally. Graduating from the School of Planning and Architecture in New Delhi, he extended his education at the Architectural Association in London with a postgraduate diploma with distinction in sustainable environmental design under Simos Yannas and an AA Diploma with honors under John Frazer. Manit says that the influence of all three programs has formulated his thinking to date and to create sustainable architecture through a framework of an evolutionary practice inspired by nature, emphasizing passive design. This has also led him to co-founding Morphogenesis in New Delhi with Sonali. This was done in 1996. And since then, they have worked across a diverse canvas ranging from architecture to urban design. Their projects have included commercial buildings, residential complexes, smart cities, institutions, offices, hotels across India and internationally. Of course, a lot of them would already be familiar to our audience, but there are some new and exciting ones which we hope to see today as well, which has also been in the news lately. So looking forward to that. But before anything else, I would like to once again extend a very warm welcome, Manit, and the floor is all yours and the conversation is yours. So smart process and smart practice for today.
Thanks, Renali. I'd actually promised myself I'd never do a Zoom presentation ever again in my life. After the 2 years of the pandemic and the numbers that were done there, I guess I'm a bit old world in terms of liking to see the people I'm talking to.
Yes.
But then, be that as it may, at least we'll try and give it a shot and see if we can hopefully make this as interactive as possible.
Absolutely.
So hi, hello everyone. When Mrinali called me up and said she wanted to do a talk, I said, I'm not going to show anything. I said, I'm just going to talk to you. And I'm going to talk to you about the most critical part of a designer's or an architect's career is not actually in designing buildings, it's in designing the practice that designs the process. And the buildings are emergent and an outcome of that process. So you spend your entire life, I mean, I've been at this for 2.5 decades now. You spend your entire life refining that process. And the better you make the process, the better the buildings become. So in some senses, we've never believed in the notion of the flashbulb idea for creating buildings. So buildings are complex and buildings touch everything, So coming to the concept of smart living, everything that we do from the time we are born to the time we die, where we work, where we study, where we play, where we eat, has architecture around it. And therefore the power of architecture is incredible. And along with that power comes great responsibility not to, sound, not use it to use the cliche rather. So I thought that I haven't, like I was saying, I haven't done a talk in a long time now. Been too busy thinking about thinking. However, when Mrinali called, I said, what I will do is talk about practice and talk about why morphogenesis, how we started, and where we are, what we've built, and why we've done what we've done. So I will, and she also pressured me into having to do a presentation with slides. So, which I don't like to do, but I will do. I've promised Mrinali, so I shall pull up a PowerPoint with the due apologies.
Well, we're making you do a lot of things you don't want to do today.
Correct. Okay. So me and Sonali, as you rightly said, started Morphogenesis in '96 after we came back from there in London, and we started out of a little garage, or rather a little mezzanine above a garage. And we were contemplating at the time about, what should be the nature of practice and why are we really setting up practice? Well, the real answer to that is that Sonali had 5 jobs and no one gave me a job. So I, had no real option but to start practice. That's how things were in those days. Always having been inspired by 5,000 years of great architectural history of the region, where if you read the top, it says form follows climate. And what we defined as an architecture of somewhere, I mean, these are all buildings from across India, from different climatic zones. And you can look at it and you can pretty much guess where, which building is from where. You can look at, at the screen, you can see Jaisalmer, tight streets, shading, you can see warm, humid climates, you can see step wells, evaporative cooling. So a very strong response and a very strong sense of identity to what constituted architecture. And that architecture continued for a really long time. Even through post-independence, there were some remarkable modernists in our country who did some great work. And then came sort of the early 90s when the Indian economy opened up and we embraced globalization. And at that time, we moved into an era where, what we define as form follows finance. And the image suddenly became more important, and the image was borrowed. It wasn't generic. It wasn't something that was emanating either from culture or from context or from climate. These are buildings, not ours, but these are buildings that are from all over India again. And it doesn't really matter anymore. I mean, one of them is Jammu, one of them is Bangalore, one of them is Bombay, one of them is Pune, one of, so it's Chennai. And it sort of, became completely deep, it sort of took away this whole identity of architecture. So we called it an architecture of nowhere. And at that point, we started wondering, how did this happen? And what would be our aim? And our aim was to, say, fine, we can't do the vernacular and be an architecture of somewhere. We definitely don't want to do this and be an architecture of nowhere. So we called our architecture an architecture of almost somewhere, where, we would have the global context in mind, but we would have an Indian perspective to it. And that's sort of really where the thrust was. The other part that we were looking at very strongly way back then, in terms of sustainability, and I would like to remind you, this was way back in '96, so about 27 years ago, and no one was really interested in the term. But we are Indians. We've been great at passive design. We've been great for thousands of years with working with very little resource. And what we've, a little research told us, that a weight of a building is about 1,500 to 2,000 kgs a square meter, which means that for an office, you need 15 tons of material to provide shelter for one person. And in a residential building, about 50 tons. That's a lot of material. Buildings have become the largest polluters because of this whole delinking from climate. And, have become one of the largest waste generators in terms of resource, in terms of waste to landfill. And it was just a ridiculous way of building, and, we're just looking at this and saying, what's gone wrong? Suddenly the world seemed to, in the mid-90s, was beginning to think that there was limitless resource and they could generate limitless waste. We did a bit of study way back then and said, is there a way of bringing back a form of architecture that's highly responsive to the resources that we have? So we looked at energy first, okay? And we said, how much energy is there really in India? Solar. And if we take all our energy requirements and project that and take all the losses and everything into account, we only really needed about 0.003% of India's land mass to generate all the energy needs that we wanted. That drove an idea that, we get a lot of sun in India. That's not one of our problems. Our problem is actually the reverse, so how to keep the sun out. And that drove a very strong part of our architecture, which was in passive design. And saying that, even if we were not going to put solar panels on top of our architecture, but we must be able to design it to be net zero energy enabled. So a lot of our work was thrusting in that direction. The second part was water. And, we thought that water will hit a crisis point. However, we have adequate water in the country. If you harness just 2% of the rainfall that India gets in a entire year, every Indian person, the 1.4 billion people population that we have, would have 150 liters of water a day. However, so the point about this architecture and why I'm showing you this was that architecture had become a one-way process. Electricity comes in, CO2 goes out, water comes in, sewage goes out, food comes in, garbage goes. So it's a one-way process. It's an open loop. Cities are designed that way. No, all the rainwater that falls drains out into the rivers, goes off to the sea. But of course, we've seen what's happened with the recent rains. But the point was, how do we begin to close loop? And we started thinking about systems and processes. And of course, the fact that people claim that, India is a, high population country, which is true. We are 3 times the density of the US, or maybe more. But if if every single family in India was given a 200 square meter plot of land, and then you did all the urban infrastructure and all the green and everything, and you'd only need 3% of India's land mass to house everyone on a 200 square meter bungalow. So this notion of high density and, so there was a lot to work with. And there was a lot of opportunity. So, we felt like the young Victorians way back in the mid-90s that, look at the canvas. We're not short on energy. We're not short on water. We're not short on land. We're just short on doing the right thing and that's where the idea of morphogenesis was born. Morphogenesis means the origins of form, structure, and organization in response to nature. And nature, in that sense, has always, become our mentor. So the first part of creating smart buildings, smart living, is to create a smart practice, because, architecture is a highly, and forget architecture, to build is a highly collaborative process. It's not the work of an individual. It's not the work of a few. It's the number of stakeholders that are there from all the consultants, the architects, the contractors, the vendors, the whole, there's a very, very large, and all this requires a serious amount of collaboration. How do you design a practice to work with it? And what we call for a practice or an architecture of all was somewhere. So quick flip back to way back in the mid-90s. So, that an anthill, well, the beauty of an anthill is that in extreme temperatures of 2 to 50 degrees Celsius, the Queen's chamber is maintained at +-1 degree or +-2 degrees. And the whole thing is designed like a massive air conditioning machine, if you may, by termites who are blind, without an architect, without an engineer. But there's a very strong process in place. And this piece of design that you're seeing here is ingenious. But it's happened for thousands of years. And you said, if termites can, are you there? Sorry,
Yeah.
Oh, you're back. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I thought when you dropped off, I thought maybe I dropped off. Sorry.
No. Sorry. I was having some network issues, so I just switched my video
No, that's fine. So, so looking at the organizational network of, and I use the term network of termites, because, the whole concept of how the termite function is, they can't see, they can barely see, but they're only responding to who's absolutely next to them. It's called the neighborhood concept. And because you follow the one who's in front of you, and that one follows the one who's next to them, and through that process of non-linear movement, this thing gets built. Okay. And then if you look at other parts of nature, highly sustainable, which is what we were trying to do with our architecture. Optimization is a key part of how nature functions. Nature is absolutely unique because it's responsive to climate and the local ecosystem, and of course, supports all life. So everything that we sort of aspire to do in architecture, which is the acronym SOUL, which I will come to later, and how we use that as our primary design process and philosophy, plagiarized from nature. And of course, the other part of the practice that we were inspired from nature was to look at a large amount of diversity. Nature works well because it's extremely diverse. So much against all management advice, the gurus, where they say specialize. We said, no, we'll go diverse. So cost, we work with a variety of resources. So we do very affordable work to very, very luxurious work. We wanted to work in all the 5 different climatic zones. We wanted to work at different scales. So our smallest project is a very small art gallery in Kalagoda to the smart city, designed for Port Blair. And of course, all the different typologies, and why diversity becomes important, and why I'm saying this for young practitioners who are out there, is that one feeds the other. When you design a housing complex, let's say it's got 500 apartments, there'll be approximately 1,000 service staff, maids, drivers, cleaners, guards, etc., with no back of house, as if they do not have any needs that require a toilet or require anything else. But if you were to do a hotel, the first thing that you would do is to make sure that the back of house is correct, because the hotelier knows that without the right back of house, the staff cannot provide service. But when you start blending those two ideas, you start doing that. So that's how the whole purpose of this, working on affordable, teaches you about an extremely high level of consciousness about how material is used. But when you work with luxury, you go to a very high level of detail. And when you bring it together, it begins to make magic. So that's where it broadly was. So when we started way back in 96, our core focus was around these areas. However, all the other management processes were built in. We were a small studio. So design, PR, which is public relations, design management. So PR is critical for architects or any designer. But unless you discourse your work, how is anyone going to know what you do? So that's part of marketing. But most importantly, how will you get criticized? And if you don't get criticized, how will you ever improve? So this was also the period when, sadly, Indian practice in the mid 90s had started to fall away as a genre. After the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, some great work had happened with the modernists I mentioned earlier. And we found that some of the larger practices had started doing a lot of this, foreign architects were designing and they were executing. And we found that problematic because that would eventually kill the genre of design, Indian design. And I know Mrinalini has asked me, what is contemporary Indian design? And to me, contemporary Indian design is what we do. It's what Indian architects do. And what we really wanted to do as part of our vision was to create a brand for contemporary Indian architecture, something that had fallen away. We couldn't understand why this sort of, architects who, there's nothing wrong with architects coming in and designing in India. That's great. We've had that from before. Me, Louis, all of them. But the question was that it was being in the mid 90s, even to date, it's being done as non-Indian, foreign, non-Indian. And that's where I have a problem, or we have a problem. Second part, of course, was the other good practices were very promoter-driven, so founder-driven, in which case, when the founder died, the practice died. And that whole body of knowledge and wisdom disappeared. So, we started looking at saying, fine, how do we grow out of this? So we started creating mini studios. And these mini studios were only purely focused on pushing the ideas of design, where we externalized, design management, which we called first time right. So first time right essentially is using wisdom and getting to make sure that you get things which are first time right rather than having to repeat them again and again. So like we say in our practice, it's okay to make a mistake once, but to make the same mistake twice is criminal. Business development, public relations, old term, publish or perish, human resource, train to replace. These are all programs that we run. Train to replace is that no one goes up the ladder until they've trained someone under them to take their job. And of course, knowledge management, learn or learn. The most crucial piece is, how you turn data into information, information into knowledge, and knowledge finally into wisdom. And how do you capture that? And how do you pass that through? So and a lot of this came from our early years of pain and practice. We found that fellow practitioners would not share. So you have to learn everything from scratch. And how painful a process is that when every time you come along, you start from scratch. Why are there no Indian firms that are 100 years old in architecture and design? The profession is, but you'll find firms globally that are that carried that, and there's a reason. So when firms perpetuate, they carry that knowledge and wisdom with them, which allows the next younger person who comes along to take that and build on it. It's like doing a PhD after a master's, after a bachelor's. But if everyone who comes along has to start from, has to start from school all over again, then, it's a long and arduous journey. So that was our, what we call Morpho 2.0, when we were a medium firm, and then we became a large firm. And for that, we decided to adopt a different strategy. And this was a strategy of the network, where we had studios that are displaced in different typologies and different specializations and different geographies, what we call jack of all and master of one. So each studio has to do everything, but they specialize in one thing. However, they still have to do everything. And that's why they become a studio. And then we embedded all these processes through, of course, we use a lot of tech in Morpho. We have our own design ERP. And all of this is shared real time across all the studios. Advantage, so we have a studio in Bangalore, Pune, Chennai, Delhi, etc., etc. So any learnings that happen anywhere are instantly shared. If a site visit is done in Hyderabad, it's instantly shared. Learnings, what worked best, what didn't, is, so we also, in effect, it's a neural network. Okay, the design of morphogenesis is like the brain. So every studio is a neuron, and morphogenesis is only the synaptic glue that connects the neuron. And when these different neurons get together and talk to each other and fire, that's how you get creativity, and through that you get what we call the smart practice. So that's really how we've sort of structured morphogenesis, designed behind. So it's like a neural network. Neural network is exactly how it mimics how the brain functions. Along with that, we put down 6 core leadership qualities. And we don't consider anyone who joins us as a person who's has a long way to go. Yes, they do have a long way to go. Everyone has a long way to go. But everyone starts on each of these 6 points. 1, building a unifying vision. 2, okay, so that's about embodying the vision of what we are chasing. 2, making sure we get great people on board. Okay, and that's key to any practice. The strength of the work that you will do, the quality of the work that you will ever produce, is a direct outcome of the quality of the people in your practice. And that's just it. So how do you, and for that, we had to, we've devised democratic governance. How democratic governance works is that there's several committees, management, leadership, etc., and they decide how morphogenesis runs. So all the rules, regulations, processes, systems are designed by the people and approved by the people. So it's a self-governing and self-perpetuating mechanism. Third is also, how do you grow yourself? And for which we then have a full program under talent development and learning to grow, some of which I mentioned before. I'll come back to point 4 when I go to the projects. 5 is results. I find that architects, when they talk, only talk design, but behind that design sits a very strong part of sustenance. The sustainability of a practice is also about achieving financial targets, about design management. Now, all of the consulting professions, whether they're the lawyers or the accountants or consulting managements, they all have very strongly defined KPIs, key performance indicators. So do we. And the example that I give to everyone in our practice is that if you were an artist and you made 1 painting in your entire life, do you think you would survive? On the other hand, if you made 100 paintings a day, what value would your work be? So there is, even for an artist, there is time as a measure of span to what they produce as a work of art. And that relationship is critical in determining how, because I can't spend an entire lifetime making a building. It may not be the best building, but probably be, much better than I spent with half the time. However, that's not how it works. So a lot about putting in these kind of systems and processes is how do you ensure that you learn, which is why along with design management comes knowledge management. And how do you therefore achieve financial targets efficiently? And of course, number 6, practice development. How do you build a brand? Now, most people, when they talk, most architects, it feels like the projects just fall in. They don't. It's a continuous process of building brand. Now, I can talk a little bit more about that, but I know I'm going to run out of time, so I will skip that. However, remember one thing, that there is nothing better than a client coming to you than you going after a client. And for that, you need to build a brand. And to build a brand requires a multi-pronged approach, whether it comes through, discourse. So Mrinali is an expert at that, but whether it's by writing, by publishing, by writing books, by entering awards, talking, everyone. So in Morpho, we have a branding strategy, not one behind the firm, but behind every individual in the firm. And we encourage them and we push them that if everyone in Morpho develops an individual brand, our collective brand will be even larger. And that's sort of how the 6 core leadership principles are tied into it. I'm going to skip past this. I'll come straight to this. Now, the reason, when you mentioned, Mrinali, that we do, every architect says we do commercial, residential, etc. But the point is you have to do it as a practice area. Now, if you think back about the neural network as an organizational design, so within our Bangalore studio, we have smaller mini studios. So someone's working on commercial, someone's working on residential. Then we have a network. So the commercial studio, the person who's working on a commercial project in Bangalore, Pune, Delhi, etc., they all tie up into a single team, which we use on the ERP. So they work as one team, even though they're sitting in different places. And that helps develop, because every learning that you get by working with a client, a new project, a different challenge, then becomes a practice area. And each practice area has its own nuances. So, it's easy. It's very difficult if you just do, one of each. But the point about the network, okay, and which is what I keep recommending. The reason I'm talking about all this today is to encourage Indian architects to not silo, is to network. There's a big advantage in cooperating versus competing. And it's the prisoner's dilemma, but cooperation has a great advantage, and you'll find this in other professions. You'll find, and I'll give you, when we talk about the Surat Diamond Bourse, I'll talk about that. We have 4,700 different diamond merchants came together to sit in the same building. They compete for the business, but they cooperate, and they made the largest building in the world, and hence they've got 80% of the business of the world because they cooperated. So so each of these, residential, commercial, office, hospitality, institutional, master planning, interiors, landscape, are individual practice areas that cut across geographies, but work with local studios. So that's the structure of the practice. Okay. It took me 27 years to do what I've just told you in the last 7-10 minutes. But the problem with that was that we had to do everything from scratch, because there was no one telling us what to do. But the reason I'm sharing with you what to do is I don't want you to start from scratch and go through that same thing again. So design your practice. You don't have to do what I'm saying, but I'm just giving you some window into what you need to think about. So the design of the practice is as important as the design of the building. Next, the design of the process. What is the process, right, that will lead to great buildings, and how do people work together? So if you remember my extraction from soul, from nature, so we took that and we put metrics around it. So what we call evidence-based design. It's very simple. If you can't measure something, you can't manage it. So, I can say my building is the most sustainable, but what does that really mean? I can say my building is the most beautiful, but what does that really mean? Everyone says the same thing. So we put on certain metrics around sustainability, optimization, uniqueness, and livability. Sustainability was very simple. Okay. It had to do with trying to push every project to net zero energy, net zero water, net zero waste to landfill. Not always successful, but as close as you can get to that. But proven through post-occupancy evaluation. So once we complete a project, we track that project. All our projects are tracked so that we get data from them. You may have designed it for a 40 EPI net zero. Is it really operating like that? Second is optimization. Misconception that buildings are built from architects' drawings. They're not. They're built from 13 critical key consultancies: structure, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, lighting, facade engineering, line, etc., etc. And to optimize each one of them so that, because they all have to work, it's integrated, right? The buildings are integrated. So right at the beginning, optimization is a tool, is a technique, is a tech that we put into place where each single consultancy, and they're all external consultants, are mapped from day one. So when we work with an air conditioning consultant, we don't tell him, here's our design, tell us how much air conditioning is going to go into. We tell him that we have designed this for 1/3 the amount of engineering of air conditioning that should be required. We want you to come back with us with not less than 800 square feet per ton of air conditioning, and don't come back till you achieve that, because we know the architecture has been built for it. So we do that together, and we put all those metrics down. I'll give you an example. Uniqueness is fundamentally got to do with the response to what the project really looks like, but in response to the client, the climate and context. Morphogenesis does not have a style. We are architects. We are pursuing an architecture which says that, when we design for Trump towers, it's very different than when we design for, let's say, Godrej. Godrej is slightly more conservative. It's a big industrial house and has a certain brand. And that brand means something. While Trump is also a big brand, but it means another thing. Mm-hmm. And the architecture that we do with them, we understand that brand. Okay, and then from that we take clues. We take clues from, of course, the climate and the context, and that's where the metrics of uniqueness come from. And similarly with livability, livability is again a process, a tech process where we define all the personas that come to a building. So not only the owner, maybe they have a visitor, maybe it's the CEO if it's an office, maybe someone who works there, the cleaner, the delivery person, the gardener, and we map. Then we abandon our thought as an architect. We put ourselves in their shoe and we walk their path, and then map their experience and then redesign inside out based on their experience, and then come back and tie it back. So that's the livability part of it. Okay, and this is a design philosophy which we won a copyright on in 2019. I think we're the only firm to have a copyright on a design process, because only copyrights are given on works of art. And it took us a few years to fight that battle, but we eventually won it in court and we did get a copyright on it. The objective was not that someone else should not copy it. Oh, please, I've seen, many other firms use the same presentation. That I'm okay with that. But it was to make a point that the design process is in itself a work of art. And therefore it should be worthy of a copyright. So these are just some, this is just a sample sheet from one of my projects, where everyone has to do this in Morpho. When you begin, you have to put down what your targets are. So on microclimate reduction in, external reduction in perceptible temperature and the mechanisms you're using to do it. Passive design for the building, how much reduction in the energy are you targeting and how are you doing it? Carrying capacity, are you being able to hit net zero? Resilience to flooding, to minimizing cut and fill, protecting natural formations, travel time. How long does it take you to get from outside to inside in a large project? Like that. So we have across all different consultancies, all across all, and even in optimization, how much steel are we planning to put into the building? How much concrete? How much of that are we, and what is the architectural design? In a high seismic zone, an asymmetrical building will consume 20% more structure because you have to design for earthquake, while that completely drops away in a low seismic zone. So, like that, I'm not going to go through all of it. We put down metrics across all of these SOU. A lot of this is driven by experience, but a lot of it is also driven from various paths that we've seen in nature. We've seen, and we've learned from projects where we made mistakes or we could have done better. So all of that sort of comes down, and this sort of, in a way, is like a design checklist, but it's also more importantly, something we can go back and measure and know how, that this is what we pledged, this is what we designed, this is the project finished. Now, how is it performing? So this is the workflow, and workflows are critical for any design process. So when we get the client brief, right, we map the client brief to what we call smart goals, which is essentially all the soul metrics. So that sort of make sure that the client, everything that's part of the client brief is captured there. Then we have 2 design teams assigned for every project. One is for designing the project. The second is spread across various locations, which are, so, if you say we're doing a housing project, we'll have The quality control team will be from a hotel, maybe from somewhere else, so that they can bring in and infuse new ideas. It's much like how nature, it's called a mutation in nature. Then we go through the progress of the work. We have a closeout, post-occupancy, goes into a knowledge management, feeds the next project. And that's the workflow. So it's always a work in progress. It's a project never finishes. When a project theoretically finishes, is when the data starts coming in, which then starts feeding the next one, then the next one. So it's a continuous work in progress for a firm. And that is why firms need to perpetuate. That is why we need firms that are 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, where newer blood comes in and then taps off this knowledge, taps off this repository of information. So that's where we are. I mean, after 27 years, we are amongst one of the largest practices in India. However, we still operate like mini studios. And in terms of setting out that vision, which I spoke about right at the beginning, about building global discourse around contemporary Indian architecture, we put a lot of effort into that. And I'm very proud to say we put in a lot of effort into that. And these are just testimonials. The reason I put them up for you on the screen is that these are testimonials that are global for what we claim is contemporary Indian architecture by morphogenesis. Everyone will have their own, but together, when you say Japanese architecture, something comes to mind. When you say German architecture, something comes to mind. When you say contemporary Indian architecture, what comes to mind? You say Indian architecture, most people around the world will say Taj Mahal. And that's that bridge that lies. That's the responsibility of the designers today, of practices today, that we have to build that notion of when someone says Indian architecture, what comes to mind? So a lot of that, what I've shown you till now, also has required a lot of tech. That's how you can you have to scale. If you don't scale, you will not be able to do all these things, and that is what makes architecture a lot more inclusive. Now, we've been working with AI since '96 because that's what I did I did a lot of artificial intelligence, neural networks, algorithms, etc. And then over there, and I used to code, and we've done that in bits and pieces, etc. However, there's been a revolution in the last 6 months. I'm sure most of you who are listening to me have played around with Midjourney or with Veras or with there's a whole bunch of shit out there. Now the question really is how do you harness it? Okay, so what you see on my screen is there's a workflow we have put into Morpho, where we're saying that so I'd gone to a conference recently in Calcutta, and these guys came up to me and they showed me pictures taken out of Midjourney or the most ghastly looking piece of architecture, which has because it's an image generated by text. Okay, and that's not the reason to use AI. All right. So what we've begun to do, and I'll just very quickly take you through this. So step one, right, was what? Project initiation, client brief. We are trying to build AI where we can analyze the large volume. So if it's a developer, they have a lot of data. So we're taking their data and analyzing it so that we can generate better responses. So we're making the brief intelligent. That goes back to a bit of the soul thing. In conceptual design, what are we doing? We are getting AI to read our own work. So we work a lot on BIM, for example. We wanted to read all of BIM models. From that, optimize and say what could be. So we've done, say, 15, 20 schools in a career. The BIM models of 20 schools. It analyzes that and generates the next one and tries to make it better. Then we can take that and make it even better with human intervention. There will always be human intervention. But the beauty of it is that it takes away a lot of so it saves you a lot of time, which is why I keep putting down time. So if we can get AI to reduce the time that it takes to do certain tasks, we can use the heuristic mind and bring that into play. So the combination is deadly. And I'm very, very excited with the way this is going. But learn to harness it. Okay. Again, with detailed design, you can automate. With working drawings, it'll automatically generate the whole set of working drawings from a normal BIM model. There's a lot that AI can do. So we put down our targets, our goals of what we wanted to do, and that's what we're working towards. So every studio has now got a little embedded AI studio, which with a lot of this testing will begin or has begun in some places. And until we learn to harness it, is when we'll bring it back to our projects. So that was my little piece on the AI, and that was just my piece of advice. Don't use it as an image generator. Understand the power of it. It's an information system. So that's my piece of what I do now. If I have some time, I'll very quickly show you a few projects. Some of, and these have mostly been completed in the last couple of years. A lot of them use a bit of AI, a bit of automation, a bit of generative algorithms or genetic algorithms, if you may. So this is Wipro. It's a campus we just finished in Hyderabad. It's about 1 million square feet on 100, and that's the first phase on 100-acre site. So it's a completely net zero project, net zero water. We built a lake where we harness the rainwater and use it for fresh water supply. However, so this I'm showing you as part of one of our how we do our sustainability exercises. So we generated a lot of forms: low rise, high density, mid rise, linear, tars, blah 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 blah. So hundreds of models, and these are done through generative algorithms. So you do that. You then test them against various criteria. So wind movement, how's the external microclimate? You test it against daylight. You test it against solar exposure. You test it against construction modularity. Is it easy to build? Now, these are all algorithm driven. And then you keep doing this, and the computer keeps doing this on algorithm till you arrive at what you would think would be the most optimal form. And then you take that. That's where this whole architecture came from. And what it really does is that for the Hyderabad climate, it creates an external environment. So, these are the columns that actually support that bridge on the top there. So there's water, which allows evaporative cooling, wind flows coming through. Sorry, it's wind flows coming through. And it cools the whole place down. So if you go there and visit this project ever, we have achieved about an 8 to 9 degrees reduction in temperature naturally from the temperature that's outside the building. So with the net result, that about 10% of that building, 100,000 square feet worth of, so the gym is outdoors, the cafeteria is outdoors, the auditorium is outdoors. And all of this sits through the year, passively cooled in full comfort conditions, rain protected. So, I mean, that's the project while it was just finishing. It went through COVID. There's some pictures there. So that's the evaporative, that's where the wind flows coming from. So, putting all that together, we could push the EPI of this building down to a point where all the common areas are not air conditioned, the outdoor areas are passively cooled. 10% of the building was knocked off. If you remember, 100,000 square feet multiplied, or that's what, 10,000 square meters multiplied by 1,500 kgs is the amount of material we saved by simply following that process. Optimization. I'll show you the Surat Diamond Bourse. And I'll tell you why. 60,000 people going in, or 70,000 people going in and out of that building, one of the most secure buildings in the world. Of course, you must have read a lot about it in the press of recent, it's just beaten the Pentagon, that's another high security building. So is this. It's built by 4,500 diamond merchants coming together. Project started and finished in 3.5, 4 years through COVID. Fantastic case study of how things are to be built. But most importantly, our biggest challenge was how do you get these 60,000 people in and out? It's a 35-acre site. It's got 10,000 car parks. So how do you get them into the site, into park security, find a parking spot, get to a lift, go up a tower, get to your office? In a project that's, like I said, it's 70 lakh square feet. It's the world's largest building. So we looked at that. And we went through this whole thing of, again, using algorithms on where should the lift nodes be, vertical transportation, where should security be, how many security points do we need, what are travel times, how should parking be organized? And based on that, that's why the shape is based on basically the vertebra. And the vertebra is the most efficient design of transferring nerve pulses to your different parts of the body, or the fish in this case. And that's what allowed for that to happen. So we get pedestrians under 5 minutes from the outside to their table. And if you're coming in a vehicle, under 7 minutes. The design emanated from that. And that was that optimization. 70,000 people is as big or bigger than a stadium. So getting in and out, and that kind of high security. Of course, we did other things. A lot of the building, the entire common areas are naturally ventilated. The fins are designed for the Venturi effect to capture the winds and flow them through. We needed the winds, and then when there's no wind, we have the stack effect. So inside we have atriums that sort of draw hot air up and pull cooler air in. And then, of course, we added a lot of radiant cooling, which is we cool the structure as opposed to cooling the entire volume of air, along with the wind flows that pretty much cuts down 80% of the air conditioning requirements of the building. So that's the project completed. Well, you've read a lot about it. You've probably seen videos, so I'm not going to go too much into it. Those are those atriums that are there for the stack effect. Those are the spaces that drive the, if I just go back, those are the fins that take the winds through for the Venturi effect. So yeah, it's my termite hill. All right, so going on another project on uniqueness. So this was a unique problem because the entire site sits on a highway, which is west. Okay, so that's the highway. That's where you see, and everyone sees this in Ahmedabad, because you can't miss it. You go from the airport to anywhere, you will go past it. And what we did was we said, there's nothing that, and of course, everyone wants to look out, to see the building. But we created a facade, which is now, I think, the world's longest doubly curved facade. But don't want to say that, because that's not the relevant piece. The relevant piece is that facade, which is made out of metal, is designed to create a shadow. So it's like it's a huge solar shadow in which the offices sit, which remain cool. So it blocks out the entire west sun. Now, to get the right curvature for the sun, so you have the earth, which is spinning, which is rotating around the sun, there's a doubly curved movement. Of course, the most optimal form would be doubly curved by extension. But to build this, we had to use a little bit of AI and BIM because there were close to 1,000 points that had to be mapped out in three-dimensional space in construction. And to use algorithms where you really need to. The human brain is good enough otherwise. And that was when it was under construction. A lot of that metal work was done by the local community for the doubly curved surface. And that's what we call our solar wall. It's a solar dam which then hides the building or protects the building from behind. And then behind is where we then start beginning to get the much cooler zones, the much our own generated microclimate. And last, on livability, I'll show you this project Forest Essentials. So, it was built again, finished during the COVID time. And, what we were really happy with is in Rishikesh, up in the hills. It's not connected by power. Doesn't take water from the city. It's completely self-sufficient. It's off-grid. It harnesses its own water. It has its own energy. And it's built by the local community, because you can get contractors up there, and it's used. So in the day, it's used as a factory for producing all the goods, Ayurvedic goods for Forest Essential. In the evening, it's used as a school, as a community school. So it's again one of those bifunctional buildings where again, I won't go into the passive design and the wind features and all of that. But the fun part was it was built by the local villages. Hence the construction technology, if I may use the term, was based on that, a building for the people, by the people. Completely off-grid. There was a small building on site. We reused everything. It's used as a school. So that's livability. How do you begin to use that 15,000 kgs of material per square meter? How do you keep, so what better sustainability if you can make buildings go 24/7, if you can use them for multiple purposes? And, it's sort of that idea. I mean, that you can use architecture, one of the most powerful tools for smart living. How do you just make that smarter? And that's really where it comes down to. So yeah, that's it. That's it for me for now. I'm going to stop sharing. And we'll go back. So yes, that's our practice. That's our process and some of the projects.
My God, Manit, you've made my work over here extremely difficult and extremely easy at the same time, because your presentation has been absolutely so extensive and so sort of informative that there's not much that I'm finding it difficult to ask questions. And that doesn't happen very often. I always have questions. But thank you so much. That's been a very, very engaging and very insightful presentation that you've offered. We're getting in a barrage of messages and comments and questions. But before anything, I want to sort of pick on one thing. And I wanted to ask you, you very candidly shared the process and your practice and how you have sort of evolved over the last 27 years. You guys obviously started from some point, have become one of the biggest architectural practices in the country, very, very renowned and prominent in the world. The other day I was in the library and I saw someone flipping through the Morphogenesis book, and I walked up to her and I said, "Oh, do you know them?" And so we had a conversation. But, Morphogenesis has kind of it's established itself as a practice with a very unique philosophy and ideology. There are lots of questions that are coming in about, the evolution of that over the last 27 years. And I feel that you've already addressed a lot of that. What I was very curious to know and very interested to hear from you was also the idea of the client, right? And how the engagement with the client has evolved over the last 27 years, and that's something that, it's sort of a recurring question that people have, but it's not something that people very comfortably talk about, right? When you're younger and when you're kind of starting up, your equation with the client is very different. When you're more established, it's very different. So it would be interesting to hear your sort of journey about how you engage with a client. How do you engage with repeat clients, and how do you pull in new clients? I think that's a very important part of the practice, right?
There is, of course, if there is no client, there is no practice.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. And then we call, like something, the business of architecture and the architecture of business are highly interrelated.
Yeah.
So, so first about how we work with a client, and then I'll come back to how we get clients. That's the real question at hand. So, 27 years ago, where the tech was not that good in terms of communication and all of that. So, you do a piece of design, you go to a client, you have a meeting, you come back, spend some time, and you go back. And that process evolved, and then, we started getting VCs and it became a little bit more interactive. However, what we have succeeded a lot with, and we've pushed a lot, is now because the tech is so good that we can make live models, right? So you can do things in 3D live, okay? And very, very quickly with a little bit of that, with some AI stuff thrown in, maybe not. So we do workshops with clients. So we do, so yes, of course, we'll have some ideas, and then we'll call the client in, and we'll do a 1 day, 2 day workshop. And if they're out of town, we'll do a 3 day workshop. And I know we just did a 5 day workshop with the client team sitting in our office. And we do this interactively. In fact, we may get some consultants in. I'm talking about early design stage. So once that piece is done, and because the tech is so good, that you don't need to go back and do something and come back. It's just done live.
Yeah.
And that just allows for a massive amount of, everyone leaves the room saying, I worked on it, even the client. There's a sense of ownership. It's not something that Morpho has done and given to them. And so they don't go and say that, oh, my architects have done a great job. They say, we have done a great job. Okay. And that's where I really see the future. I really see the future in this highly collaborative environment. We didn't succeed very well on Zoom or other VC platforms. It's not the same. You do need to get into that space, and most importantly, I think this is what we teach everyone in Morpho. Put yourself in the shoes of the client. They may be saying something, their pain point may be different. Mudda kya hai? What is try and understand what is the pain point of that client. And get to that until you find that. Just keep at it. And when you find it, solve it. Of course, with all the other things. No, and those pain points are very different. Everyone has their own sort of thing. So that's the second piece. Okay, one, high level of interactive collaboration. Be open. I mean, design with the client. There, at the end of the day, it's for them. Two, right? Understand the pain point. Understand mudda kya. That's it. Let's just keep that in your head. What's the issue at hand? That's two. Okay. And three, is we ensure that every project has 3 touch points from our side. And we so it's part of a workflow, right? So every project will have 3 touch points to a client. So we ensure, and one of those 3 touch points is the person who's a client rep in our own office. But it's not the client's rep, it's our own, one of the team members. Their job is to protect the client internally. The client brief internally. Okay, so we follow that as a process. Right. And out of that, we still need to get a lot of innovation done. We need to, of course, all that will happen. But once you do that, there's just, that creates a lot of stickiness. Today, when we started Morpho, of course, 100% of the work we went out with a begging bowl. And we did a few competitions, won them. Then some word of mouth came in. Today, about 70% of the business that we get is repeat clients. The remaining 30% are call-ins, people who are coming to us either through referrals or because of our brand or through the media that we've generated, or which is why the discourse.
Yeah.
So discourse, word of mouth, but most importantly, solve the client's problem. Don't become his problem.
No, I think that it's very interesting that you say that, right? Because for anybody who's starting up a practice and establishing themselves, step 1 is to start your studio, but step 2 is also to grow it, and to be able and to find. And I think that's where what I found really interesting was that you have different strategies for different parts of your journey, right? When you are a small practice, you look at things differently. When you grow a little bit more, you change your perspective. When you grow further, you have to skew your perspective. You have to approach things from different angles, right? Like you would do for a project. If you're doing a small, medium, large project, or you're doing different typologies, you probably want to look at your own. And I think at this point, it helps to kind of step away and to look at yourself from a distance and to evaluate and maybe ask yourself, right? Mudda kya hai? Sometimes you need to kind of become your own client and put yourself in that position. Another thing very interestingly that you brought up was this idea of technology, right? And how you kind of use technology to engage with the client. And of course, there's this whole thing, you talked about AI and how AI is the next big thing. That's the biggest conversation that's happening today in architectural, outside of academia, is that what is, the morals and the ethics of AI in using that. But it's also interesting to see that a lot of people are using AI and, quick, or I wouldn't say quick, but more convenient uses of AI like Midjourney and the lot, to create visuals to be able to engage with the client more, right? To kind of enfold them into the process. And so has that, I know you're probably using a lot more sophisticated softwares and practices, but there is this common question that, how does AI sort of change your relationship with the client? Or is it something that can alter that process?
Well, if you remember my slide on my AI workflow, see AI as a tool. Okay, let me put it another way. Before any tech existed, right, we were making buildings in this world, and we were making some fantastic buildings, right? Even before electricity, right? Taj Mahal didn't have, there was no, what was, get you in and build buildings, right?
Yeah.
So what is the issue? And some of them, like I showed in my earlier slide, some of the vernacular buildings that are possibly maybe not even built by architects are phenomenal. What is the issue? Mudda kya hai? Okay, mudda ye hai कि time nahi hai. Okay, so some of those buildings were built over 30, 40 years. Patience. Abhi problem hai, time. So there are 2 things. There is time and then there is space. Right? So what AI can do is it can compress time so that the space for you to think can remain free. That is the power.
So there are lots of
Not
people
to
who will
generate
argue
Okay.
with that. I'm saying people will argue with that because then again, right? Let's say if I have to play devil's advocate and you say that you're compressing time in order to produce more or better, people would argue that you're diluting your efforts, your creative efforts using technology.
No.
That's the big question over here, right? A lot of
you're creating the space to be creative. The job of what AI is doing is for us, and it's different for different people. What we are using AI for is to take out the repetition, to take out the monotonous, to take out what we can, what we think is below, or what we think does not do justice to human ingenuity.
Labor.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And and sure, I can sit with I can do eight designs of a room and render them. It probably take a week. AI will pump it out in a day.
Yeah.
However, the question is that the AI is it pumping out someone else's design, or is it pumping out a design that is based around a process? So the process, you need to train the AI on that process. Now,
That's the big debate, right? Like where does authorship lie? Because what AI is doing today is amalgamating multiple people's multiple visions into something new based on prompts that you're giving them. So can you claim authorship over the prompt?
No.
Can you claim authorship over the product?
We want to use our own data sets. See, we've got 27 years of data setting in our machines, right?
Yeah.
Every single project that we've done, right? There's emails, there's models, there's 2D drawings, there's Excel sheets, there's a tremendous amount of information.
Sure.
We want our AI to use that engine. Okay. I don't see the point of generating floor plans on data sets which are built around American apartments.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where all the kitchens will end up without natural light or ventilation, or the toilets will end up with natural light or ventilation. It doesn't work. Okay. So there are 2-3 parts to AI. There's the data set, there's the schema. Okay. And then there is the selection process of who plays God. Okay. And that's but until the data set is the right data set, it's a monkey sitting on a typewriter to try, pumping out Shakespeare.
I think this will be a good time to pull in some questions. Actually, we have an audience poll. And we wanted to ask people, because this was sort of like, we got a lot of questions before the session even started. And so we thought we'd do a quick audience poll. Rudra, can you pull up the first one, which is, what has been the main struggle while setting up your design or architecture practice, right? Because a lot of people have come up with varied ideas, and I feel like you've covered a lot of these, but it would be interesting to see that people who are actually listening in, what are their actual struggles, right? So let's give them a couple of seconds and then we can reveal the results. Unfortunately, we can't vote, but Rudra, whenever you're ready for the results, let's see what we've got.
Should I think it says all of the above?
Well then, yeah, see, data. Everyone's trying to collect data, right, at the end of it.
Correct.
Yeah. This goes into our newsletter as well. There'll be a nice, like a little pie chart, which will say, this is what the audience said. But yeah, I think for a lot of people, it is the idea of finding clients. I mean, repeat clients will come later, but finding clients, establishing your own niche. You talked about not having a style. I think some people struggle because they feel that, oh, if I don't have a style, I don't have a niche, right? But I think what you said was very pertinent in terms of diversify. You can do a lot of things at once. But there is that, I think that idea, there is that dichotomy of how the profession is getting hyper specialized on one hand, and yet the sort of the boundaries between careers and between professions is getting.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
God forbid you need heart surgery. Tell me, you have to find a doctor to do your heart surgery, a surgeon. What is your first criteria? Go on, answer quickly.
I'm the wrong person to ask this. Both my parents are doctors.
All right, terrible. Anyways, but you still answer them. Answer. What's your first criteria?
Well, do you want to see their credentials?
Experience.
Yeah.
Second criteria. So you found a doctor that's got good experience. Say one is in, you're in London right now. Say one's in London and say one's in Germany.
Sure.
What would you pick?
But I would still go with merit and their experience. Maybe references.
Suppose they're equally meritorious, equally experienced. One's in London, one's in Frankfurt. Who would you pick?
I would probably pick somebody who I can get a reference for.
So that's point number 3. Now, so when you start answering these questions, you'll learn how to get a client.
Yeah.
Okay. So you will have to demonstrate experience. Now, for young practitioners, bloody difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is why the notion of the collaborative. We need to find practices that, if smaller practices collaborate with larger practices, we can do work. Okay. And, it's because we don't do all the work that we get, but we can mentor. There are models like this internationally. Or like in our own practice, we have small studios that are run by a person, right, who's an entrepreneur, internal entrepreneur. Okay.
Right.
Be that as it may. So there's 6 or 7 areas, like you said, 1, experience. 2, right? You said merit. Merit comes from branding. That's only how you'll get the merit from. 3, reference, right? Word of mouth. 4,
Yeah.
location. You will not travel to, if the people like totally, so why do we have studios in different parts? Because we're close to the client.
Of course, accessibility.
Accessibility. Okay.
Yeah.
So these 4, 5 things. Okay. At the end of the day, all the, and of course, then you have the right team with the right skill set. He may be a great surgeon. Does he have a shitty hospital?
Yeah. The infrastructure.
Do they even have an OT that's clean?
Yeah. So your infrastructure, right? Like, are you equipped to cater to and deliver what is being asked for?
So my suggestion to everyone here is, if you are thinking about getting clients, just answer that question for yourself. How would you pick a surgeon to do your heart surgery? What do you, and what you will shit bricks about, which I did as well, is that if you're, out of college and you're 27 and wanting to set up practice, would you go get your heart surgery done by a 27-year-old? No. What do you go get over now? The same question from a client side.
Yeah.
If they're spending some 20, 30, 40, 100 crores, whatever it is, the project, right? Will they trust a 27-year-old? Okay. Yeah. So the early part of this journey, and that's in all professional services, whether you're in law, whether you're in the early part of the journey is a tough one. So that's why internationally, you won't have people starting a practice till they're 40, till they've worked in a firm for 15, 17 years, and then they set up a practice, they build the relationships a little bit, they build some experience, and then they go and set up practice. Okay, because it's expensive to set up a practice, not like the olden days. Each of our machines, it costs us about 3 to 4 lakh rupees between the hardware and the software. And these are not our high-end ones. Okay, so but until you get all those pieces together.
I think you've touched on a couple of nerves, but let's pull up the results first. Ruchir, can we see what we've got? Oh, okay, that's surprising. Employing a team who understands and aligns with your vision, 26%. Finding clients whose ideals match yours, 28%. And then we've got making it function smoothly with smart processes as well as administrative practices in one place, 19%. The lowest is others. Okay. But, and then we've got establishing your niche to be able to market, promote, and your practice. So, it's quite equally divided, except for we're talking about repeat clients. I guess, yeah. Repeat clients don't fare as much because I guess, your first struggle is get clients and repeat clients will come at a later stage. But what that's an interesting insight. But what you did touch upon when you were speaking, Abhi, was this idea of finances, right? 2 things. And I want to come to both of them. I know we're running out of time a little bit, but finances, and people are asking about like, how do you manage finances? How do you kind of, set up your financial system? And if you'd want to address that. I know it's a little open-ended, but.
So I'll tell you how, I'll roughly tell you how we do it. Okay. In any professional services, you have what are called billable hours. Okay. So say a team is working on a project. Okay. Everyone in Morphogenesis will automatically timesheet on the projects that they're working on versus various stages. Of course, over the years, we know how much time everything should take. Yeah. And we know that if something is going over, then there's a problem. And if it's under also, there is a problem. However, so we've got a budget of time. We know how much our time costs. Our currency is time. So if you begin to think about time as currency, which is the first step to financial planning, right? Then you budget the project out. Okay, you define, so let's say let's say on an average, let's say your billing rate is 2,000 rupees an hour. Okay, and I'll come to where these numbers come from. Sure. Okay, and you've got about 2,000 hours, working hours in a year. So per architect, you'll end up doing a revenue of say 40 lakhs. Okay, to do a revenue of 40 lakhs per architect. Now, out of that 2,000 rupees, how much are you paying the architect, the person, the billable hour, right? And then multiple people are going to get paid from that, right? Then you will come to a ratio of billing revenues to the billable cost, man-hour cost, person-hour cost, to be politically correct, right? And those ratios in consulting generally vary from a 1:3 to a 1:4. Okay. The math being that about 1/3 of every 100 rupee of revenue that your firm gets should go to the salaries of the people working on the project. About a third goes towards office expenses, and a third goes towards profits. Okay. The profits post-tax will come down to about 20%, which you redeploy to growing the firm. Okay. Now, and that's the sort of high-level, simple part of this. If your metrics, okay, are not matching to a third of what we call operations cost, a third of office plus your central support team, okay, non-people team, and a third of profit, then there's something wrong going in with your firm. Sit down and get the efficiencies worked out. Two, once you start getting to get that piece sorted, then you come to another concept which is called bill in hand. How much billing do you have left to achieve, and what is your billing efficiency rate? So, for example, if I begin the year with say 100 rupees worth of bill in hand, I know that the billing efficiency rate is anywhere between 30 to 40% of that in a year. So if I bill out 30 rupees out of that in a year, I will end up with 70 rupees next year, and I'll get messed up. I need to replenish that 30. So I need to sign 30 rupees worth of new projects more. Plus, I need to add more to that to be able to grow next year. So I need to sign 50 rupees worth of new projects this year. So these are very, very simple. And then it all ties up and, we can run so that's a sort of a broad level answer to putting financial metrics. The point about professional services is being on a treadmill.
Yeah.
You have a pool of, your client who's paying you a fee, or clients who are paying you a fee. You're constantly billing out that fee, and you're depleting that pool to which you have to keep adding back and adding a bit more. You can't stop either cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll fall off.
Exactly. It's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. It's a marathon.
It's not a sprint.
It's not. You have to keep running. And I guess since you're in a marathon, you have to pace yourself, right? To be able to sustain that pace and to be able to, well, whatever your finish line might be. And I think that's like a whole other discussion in terms of what is your finish line and what do you achieve at the end of it. What's really interesting is that I feel that from this entire, an hour and 20-minute session that we've had, there are multiple sort of conversations and masterclasses that can spin off of it. But unfortunately, we're going to have to sort of, stop it here. And I want to stop on one question that is very, it's popular, and we're kind of being flooded with that, is who does Morphogenesis employ? Because you brought it up in between in the initial part of your presentation, and people are curious to know what is who are the kind of people that Morphogenesis is looking for, or what is Morphogenesis looking for?
So if you look at our segment, which is called getting great people on board, okay, the first thing that we look at is for people who have vision alignment. Second thing that we look at is for values. So our values are very clearly defined. So it starts off with sensitivity. Sensitivity is about that that you will not that you will respect everyone, your juniors, your seniors, your clients, your colleagues. Then we have ambition. We look for ambition. You must have a can-do attitude. We look for integrity. We look for synergy. Synergy is you believe that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It's we before I. So we look for those kind of values in people, and between the vision and the values, and a sense of aesthetic in the portfolio, we will take you.
So I guess big notes to self for everybody.
That's what we will do. We are like any other professional services institution. We are we are an academy. We are a university in ourselves. So but that is the alignment that that everyone should do, even if you're a small firm.
Yeah,
Hire people that align to your value sets.
I think this is insightful on both ends, right? It's not only about people who are looking for opportunities and who are looking to for employment, but people who want to employ people, because it is very important to list down what your requirements are, list down what is it that you want to work on, what are the principles for yourself, and
Correct.
what is, in a way, it's like establishing your brand identity and then seeing that, whoever comes on board should be a part of that, right? And should be able to forward that. And I think what's been really interesting is about how you've been very open about how it's not only about, it's morphogenesis in a way is like a kit of parts, right? It's not about two people sitting at the top and kind of pushing things or dragging things along, but you've got multiple people, and each of those people have their own roles and their own leadership and their own sort of, I think what kind of takes, for me, what a big take home is, and this is something that I've been talking about for years, is a sense of ownership. Right? If you don't have that sense of ownership, you will never belong. You will always be working for something, but not with something. And I think it's a small but very significant distinction to work for an organization or a person or anything as opposed to working with. And I think that becomes that's a turning point in your perspective, in the way you think, and therefore in the way you work. But I know I'm getting like messages on the side saying that we need to wrap up, but Manit, it has been absolutely brilliant. Lots of comments. I think you can see some of them because they're all in the chat box, but people are saying brilliant presentation. Everyone's really enjoyed it. And I think for more than anything else, I think it's really interesting to see that someone of your stature to be candid about how you guys are working and how you function as a practice in your process, in your projects. It would be really interesting to just do a series of, calling different studios and saying, bear it all and, break it down for everyone. And I think you've kind of probably sparked that off a little bit. But thank you so much for your time, for taking out the time for your presentation and for your absolutely candid, open, transparent, honest insights into smart practice and smart process.
Thank you, Renali. I enjoyed being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you all. In case you have any more questions and comments, you can, feel free to send them in. The recording for this session is going to be available on the Facebook page. So please feel free to come back to it. This is the Godrej Locks Facebook page. We'll send a link in the chat box if you want to ever refer to it again. And there's also a feedback form. So it would be great if you could click on that and fill that in for us to know how we are doing and, what else you'd like to hear about, who are the kind of speakers you'd like to hear from. And yeah, to keep everyone up to date and up to speed. So have a great weekend, evening, and Manit, thank you once again.
Thank you. Bye all.
See you.